Listen, if you're still selling on your sales calls, then you've already lost the deal. The best consultants never pitch. They guide buyers to make decisions where the buyer actually feels informed and comfortable to proceed. What I'm going to share with you and what you're going to learn in this video is a system for closing 5, 6, and even 7-figure deals without any pressure tactics. I just recently interviewed Matt Dixon. Matt is the author of the books The Challenger Sale, The Jolt Effect, and his most recent book, The Activator Advantage. And what he shared with me and the research that he did of over 1,000, I think it was 1,300 or 1,800 different professional services firms and leaders in those firms and key people, was that the most successful business developers don't actually sell. They don't push. What they do is they deliver massive value and they do it consistently. So I'll give you an example of this. Not long ago, I shared with some clients and contacts a new program that we were starting for 7-figure consulting business owners. And I had several conversations with these 7-figure consulting business owners. So they're all already doing well. They're savvy, they're busy people. I didn't sell. I didn't need to sell. I didn't pitch. What we did and what I had was a conversation with each of them about what is going on in their world, why it might make sense for them to be part of this program. There's no pressure, no sneaky tactics, just value delivered through a conversation. I offered value, they received value, right? It was a genuine conversation about their situation and why it might make sense for them to be a part of what we are launching. Well, those conversations in just a few months led to over $600,000 in new business. There's something that you should know about called the pressure paradox, right? The harder that you push, the smaller the deal becomes. And said another way, the harder that you push, the more that a buyer tends to actually want to run the other way, right? So you in a sales situation, right, in a conversation with a buyer, the more you push, the more that they're going to go the direction that you push. What you want to do is you want to pull them, you want to bring them towards you, but you don't do that through sneaky tactics or promotions or trying to twist their arm, right? You do that through really delivering value. And there's research behind this that shows that 40 to 60% of qualified opportunities actually end in no decision. And so that's not the buyer choosing to work with a competitor. That's a buyer just freezing because they feel like they're being sold to, they feel uncomfortable, and they go away and they might have to kind of restart their research. But people don't buy when they feel that they are being sold to. There's that common saying, and I have no idea who created this initially, but the saying is that people don't like to be sold to, but they like to buy, right? Buyers like to buy, but nobody likes the idea of being sold to. That's why the kind of used car salesperson, if you will, has a pretty bad reputation, because back in the day, and I remember going to certain dealerships and feeling like, just a lot of pressure. That is not conducive to, or somebody making a decision where they feel informed, where they feel like there's no rush, there's no pressure. This is right about finding a real fit, a mutual fit, as we like to call it. So you want to think about shifting from persuasion to more about facilitation, right? How can you facilitate a conversation with a buyer where they clearly see value? They feel compelled to move forward because it's the right and most logical path for them to get the result that they want. And so your job isn't to convince, it's to help the buyer to see value, to make them feel that they can trust you, to have them believe, again, that you can deliver the result that they want, whatever that might be. And it's important to also keep in mind that, the sale or what goes into generating the sale, the majority of it is done way before the actual sales conversation happens, right? It's the pre-sales, if you will. It's the things that you do before you actually have a conversation with a buyer that make the biggest difference or have the biggest impact on the success of whether or not you are going to end up working with that person. And so let me offer you a few things that are quite powerful to keep in mind that can help you with this pre-sales. The first is to understand that you want buyers to see you as an authority, and they will only see you as an authority if you take the steps to position yourself as an authority. If they've never heard of you before, if they've never seen anything of you or your intellectual property before, the chances of them feeling comfortable with you and believing that you can actually deliver on what you say that you can are much lower as compared to if you are speaking and they see you giving a talk, or if you're on a panel, or if you're on a podcast, or you've written an article for a publication that they read. So the idea being that finding ways that you can get in front of your ideal clients, whether it's face to face, right? You meet them at a networking event or at a conference. That's a great way to build a relationship. But even better, if you can be seen as in a position of authority, right? Delivering a talk at an event or a trade association, or writing in a publication, right? Being featured on a podcast, anything that can elevate your position in the mind of the buyer, that goes a long way. Now, there's other things you can do. You can have case studies or testimonials on your website, right? You can create an environment where you, for example, make a list of all the different places that you've given talks, or all the different places that your work has been featured. And you can have videos. It can be very extensive, or it can be very simple. But the name of the game here from the authority perspective is that it's one thing for you to say how great you are, but it's much more powerful and much more effective if you can have others say it about you. And that can be in terms of direct testimonials, right? References, referrals, case studies, lists of results. But it can also be indirect, right? You just showing up in places to speak, or places that you might write. Now, that leads to the next one, which is content, right? Content is one of the most powerful ways that you can demonstrate your expertise, and you can quote unquote sell without actually selling. Imagine for a moment somebody finds an article that you've written, or they watch a video that you've recorded, or again, they see a talk that you've given. And in whatever that format or structure is, you're delivering great value to that person. You're speaking to the pain points that they have. You're sharing examples of how you've solved the problems that they're dealing with, right? If you are delivering a lot of value, insights, ideas, and they consume that content, and again, it has to be valuable, not just general surface level, kind of information that they can find anywhere. But if you're truly offering unique insights and ideas and opinions and best practices, right? Research, data, so on and so forth, you've established yourself in their mind as someone who really knows what you're talking about, right? You are an expert. And so it doesn't mean that they're not going to look at and try and find others, but if they have a problem that you've now demonstrated that you can solve, you're going to be at the top of their list. And so the more content that you put in front of your ideal clients, so the more consistent that you do this. And again, it can be, you can write books, you can be active on LinkedIn, you can give talks, right? You can be on podcasts. The actual format can be many different things, but the most important thing is that you're getting in front of your ideal clients consistently, and that you are delivering what in the mind of that buyer, right, or consumer, that is valuable to them. And that is really, really powerful, because you are selling without having to sell, right? You don't have to tell them how good you are, or how knowledgeable you are, or what your track record is, if your content has already done that, and if your authority materials have already done that. Okay. Now, the third thing to keep in mind is about your pipeline, right? If you have 3 to 5 opportunities in your pipeline at any given time, then you're not going to feel as pressured to make that deal. And we'll look at it from the opposite perspective. If you don't have a robust pipeline, then you're going to feel the need to apply more pressure, because that deal that's on your doorstep right now counts a lot more, because it's the one. But if it doesn't have to be the one, because you have other opportunities, in the hopper, if you will, then you're going to be positioning yourself in a much more abundant place, right? So you've probably heard the concept of scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. The scarcity mindset is one where you're always thinking this is the last, or will there be more? And so you operate from a place of scarcity. But an abundance mindset is the exact opposite, that you can always create more. There's always more opportunity. And so the more that you can operate from that place of abundance, the more confident you will be, the more kind of power and again, confidence and self-esteem, you'll exude that. And buyers don't like to be, and typically don't want to spend time and don't feel comfortable with those that are in a scarcity mindset, because you exude the opposite of confidence, right? You tend to be a little bit more meek. You tend to be a little bit more guarded. You tend to not show up as powerfully. Whereas if you are in the abundance mindset, then buyers can see that, and that gives them a lot more confidence, because it feels like this person is confident, therefore they must really be good at what they do. There must be a reason for them to be confident. All right. I think it's just also important to say that, when you don't need the deal because you have that pipeline, prospects sense it and actually want to work more with you. Whereas the opposite is true. If the buyer senses that you need that deal and you're almost desperate to make that deal happen, that's going to push them away. So what's important to remember is to put yourself in a position where you don't need that deal, where you have other opportunities, because buyers sense desperation. And if everything is on the line to make that one deal, and if you're coming across and the buyer senses that you are desperate, then they're more likely to believe that there's a reason why you're desperate, right? If somebody has more business they can handle, like, that's going to send a message to the buyer. They're going to sense that, they're going to see that you're not as hungry for that deal, because you know that you're in a good place. Well, there's probably a reason that you're in a good place, because you're good at what you do. Whereas somebody who feels or is coming across very desperate in the mind of the buyer, or what the buyer is sensing, there's probably a reason why they're desperate, why they don't have a lot of business. Because, again, whether this is reality or not, it signals to the buyer that you may not be as good as somebody who comes across as being more confident. So keep that in mind. And I'll tell you, I talk about this idea of pre-sales and content. We have a client who learned how to strategically get in front of their ideal clients, and they did it consistently through authority content. And they did it over and over and over. Today, their business is doing well over $2 million, all recurring revenue. It's an incredibly profitable business because they didn't think short term. They understood the power of long term and the power of pre-selling buyers, so that when they have a conversation with buyers, the buyer is already sold on working with them. All right, let's talk about another key to being successful, and that is what questions to ask, right? Sales is a conversation. It's not one-sided. Instead of just thinking about backpedaling and trying to deal with objections that come up, the most successful people in sales and business development and professional services, right, in the world of consulting, they understand the power of surfacing indecision. They ask questions, many questions, and I'll give you 3 that might be powerful for you to implement if you're not, or to use if you're not already. Number 1, asking the buyer, well, what happens if you don't solve this? And that can help to expose potential consequences. Another question is, well, what's the real cost of waiting another quarter? And that can help to identify urgency, right, without applying too much pressure. And then the third question is, who else needs to be part of this decision? And that's really critical, because you might find that you're talking to the wrong person, or you might find that you're talking to the right person, but they're not the only person. Identifying that can help you to, set your expectations, and even more importantly, to align yourself with the people that are going to be able to say yes to moving that business forward, right? Each question starts to activate the thinking of the ideal client, of the buyer. And what you might find, and we've seen this with many clients that we've worked with, especially those that are, mid and high 6 and well into 7 figures, is that you might start off talking to a buyer about one piece of business or one kind of program or offering that's, call it $50,000. But as you start to ask these questions, you are identifying the bigger picture. You're identifying the core. You're looking at different implications, consequences, risk, reward, right? Return on investment, who else is involved. You're getting a lot more, right, of that picture, and you're really understanding who is involved and what is the value of doing this work. And we've seen many projects go from what somebody thought initially was $50,000 and turns it into $150,000 or even $250,000, because they're able to expand the scope of the engagement by asking these questions. So this is also how you get to a much bigger deal. It's, instead of trying to speed up, you slow down, you slow things down. Because if you come into a buyer conversation and all you're trying to do is to speed through things, well, number 1, you're probably going to end up unhappy, moving too quickly to a proposal only to find that people are ghosting you. But number 2 is it sends a signal to the buyer that this person is just trying to sell. And remember, that has the opposite effect that you want. That pushes people away instead of actually bringing them towards you. Let's now talk a little bit more about this idea of pipeline. Because if you're desperate for a deal, it's going to be much harder for you to close premium deals. And as I mentioned a moment ago, you want to aim to have 3 to 5 times more revenue in your pipeline, right, than you're actually realizing. Just to boil this down and make it very simple, your pipeline, right, you should have more opportunities than you can handle at any given time. Now, that's a great place to be, and I recognize that you may not be there today, but know that when you get to that place, it's amazing, because now you get to pick and choose who you want to work with. Right? You can say yes to the right projects, and you can feel very confident saying no to the wrong ones. You don't need to discount. You don't need to negotiate. You simply get to work with those that you want to work with. And those are people that are committed those are people that are high value, and those are people that you love delivering results for. And this is why it's so critically important to build a pipeline. And that includes all the elements of outreach and follow-up and CRM and management, of that pipeline, and authority building and content, right? There's a lot of elements and parts that go into this. But when you have the right system in place, it's amazing when we see what happens to our clients that we work with who start to put these systems into their business, because they go from getting most of their business through referrals in many cases, even though they've done very well, to having a system, having more consistency, and realizing that we're in a position now where we have a lot more control on our own destiny, on the direction of the company, because we're not relying just on one person or referrals whenever they come to us. We actually have a way to generate business. And I want to be very transparent with you. That doesn't happen overnight, right? This is a real business. It's not like you just snap your fingers or click on some button and magically things are done. And yes, even in the age of automation and AI that we live in, there is real work that needs to be done. But if you have the right system in place, it can work incredibly well for you. And we have a lot of resources throughout the Consulting Success podcast, on the consultingsuccess.com website, other episodes here on YouTube. Check them out, or feel free to go to consultingsuccess.com, click on coaching, get in touch, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you about your business to see what systems might benefit your growth so that you can grow strategically and confidently. All right. So before you start thinking about closing bigger deals, right? It's really understanding that it's not about what you do in the sales conversation. Yes, the sales conversation is important, but it's what you do before the sales conversation that will have the biggest impact on how successful that sales conversation goes. Now, the other thing I want to offer you is just to realize and to really see that what you are experiencing in your business today is not the result of what you did yesterday in your business, or even last week, or probably even not last month. The reality and what you're seeing in your business today in terms of the results that you have is the result of what you did 60, 90, 120 days ago or more. And so that means that if you want to see better results in your business today, you have to start today, right? And because it's not going to happen tomorrow. But the sooner that you begin, the sooner you'll start seeing the results that you want. And that also means that it's critically important for you to get in front of your ideal clients consistently, not to sell, right? We already talked about that. You don't close 5, 6, and 7-figure deals by tricking people, by having fancy tactics, by twisting people's arms, right? You land these sizable and premium level deals by delivering powerful insights, ideas, and value to your ideal clients consistently. That's what makes the difference. The best consultants don't close deals. They open possibilities that clients are eager to pursue.